In this video, we're going to be taking a look at making a fun project. But first, I've got to take all these templates I printed out and tape them all together. Now, that part's not fun. But I do this just to show you that you can do it if you just have a regular 8.5 by 11 printer. I also give you the SVG file so that if you have a vinyl cutter like I do, you can just cut out a piece of vinyl to make your template. But in this case, we're just going to tape these all up, and it's going to be really easy to do. So we'll go ahead and get that done first, and then we'll show you our next step. Okay, so there is our template. Now yours is going to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so you know how they're supposed together. Mine was a bit of a puzzle. I had to figure it out. But hey, that's why we make these videos. So you can see, hopefully you can kind of see, what we're going to do is we're going to make a really cool wooden feather, and we're going to do that using a bunch of our scraps. Now the way I've designed this feather is its maximum width is about 11 inches wide, and this particular one I've got 30 inches tall. Okay, and I make them all different sizes, but now we're going to go over and look at our scraps and see what we're going to be using to build this. So here is my mess, and you can see I've got all these little pieces of scrap fence picket, okay, and I've got bunches of it. So when I get bunches of it like this, I make lots of different things, but I am going to be making up some feathers. I have a lady who buys them wholesale, and she sells them at the different shows and things that she goes to. So what we do is we just take a bunch of these random scraps and we put an angle on them. We can do 30, 45, 15 degrees, whatever angle you want. It really doesn't matter. I typically will use 30, but honestly, it really doesn't matter what angle you put on them. So one end, we've got to put an angle on all of them. And then the other thing that we got to do is these should be varying widths. We can do some that are full size, but some that are smaller. I don't really have any real small scraps, but usually from 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 2.5, I'll just make a bunch of random widths. So it doesn't really matter. We've got all kinds of random scraps laying about. Like here's a big piece of fence picket right here. And see, obviously, it's more narrow than this one. So just a bunch of random scraps. Doesn't matter what size or what they are, but we do want some variety. Okay, so usually what I'll do, see, I have some longer ones too. So usually what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the angle on them, and then I'll take them to the table saw, and then we'll cut them to various different widths. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab me a bunch of scraps. I don't know how many pieces it's gonna take, but we'll count them at the end and see. I'm guessing 20 or 30 pieces, maybe. I don't really know. But anyhow, we'll do that, and then we'll take a look at the next step. Okay, so I think this is going to be enough for this project. But so you can see what I did. I just grabbed a bunch of random scraps that were scattered everywhere. Knots and things like that are wonderful. So for this project, you know, that's going to really add to it. So you can see what I did. I just got a bunch of 30-degree cuts on one side, okay? So that's step one. Now this was just some small stock that I happened to have a big stick of. So I just whacked it, you know, just about that length. That's what you need, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all of this, go over to the table saw and cut me some 3-inch ones, some 4-inch ones, maybe some 2-inch ones, just some random widths, because we don't want them all 5.5 inches wide. So I'm going to go over the table saw and do that real quick, run these through, and we'll leave some of them. I'll pick out a few that I like, just as is, and then we'll cut some down to varying widths. Okay, so now you can kind of see the mess we got going here. We've got fence pickets of all varying widths and sizes and so forth. So now what I'm going to do is kind of just use my artistic freedom and get it all laid out how I think I want it, and then I'll show you and we'll talk about exactly what I did there. Okay, so this is what we're after. So you can see how I kind of have all these varying widths. I started here at the bottom, and I try not to have any of them line up on the left and the right. So just kind of scatter them however you think it looks good, and that's what we run with. So I measured from this tip to this tip, we got about 31 inches, but our feather is only 30 inches. So now we're going to lay our template down and just loosely trace around our template. So there we go. We've loosely traced around our template. And it doesn't have to, obviously doesn't have to be perfect. So just very loosely trace around the template. And then you'll see you have your outline. Okay. So you don't have to be super accurate. Even when you're cutting out your feather silhouette, you don't have to be super accurate. I have 6 different silhouettes that come when you buy the plans. If you buy the plans, we have 6 silhouettes that come for you. So you can have a variety of different looking feathers. And of course you can make the template as big or as small as you want and print it out. So that is that portion. Now what we have to do is take a piece of fence picket, and we have to make this, make a backer for this. And I'll try to explain that exactly how I go about doing it. This I kind of do freehand, so it doesn't really require a specific template. But I'll explain that. I'll get that set up, and then I'll kind of explain what I'm doing to make the backer for this. So I have a scrap piece of fence picket, just so happens to be basically long enough for this project. Now this particular one we don't have to do much with because all we have to do is come down here, and we want to come in about 1 inch from the outside of our outline here. So we can do something like that, and then we can do, there's no real specific, that's why it's pretty straightforward. And then same thing up here. We'll come up here right about there, the outline's here, so we'll start there. Okay, and we'll nip that off with our jigsaw, and then we'll put it on there and place it on there and make sure that's going to work good for what we're going to do, and then we'll go from there. So you can see we cut that here. We're well within our margin here. Same thing up here. So that's all we really need to do. Not a big deal. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use some wood glue. We're going to use some 1-inch staples, because our fence picket material is 5/8 and 5/8. So we'll use 1-inch staples, and then we'll staple, using a lot of staples, all these pieces together. I may have to, because I do see here, we may have to modify that, because this will catch all of our boards, but this one, it does not catch that one. So we may have to modify the top of our feather a little bit to not include that. I didn't really think about that. So what we can do, this is a pretty easy thing. We'll slide him up, and then we'll put a wider piece in here so we can staple both of those. I did not catch that earlier. Okay, so now we'll be able to staple all those, and then we'll just take our pencil and we can just kind of make our own situation. Boom. There you go. So now all of that will get stapled together. Okay? So that will be my next step, is to put these all together. So you see here, my seam is pretty tight. You want it pretty tight, doesn't have to be perfect, but it is pretty tight. So I'm gonna put some glue on my board here, and then we'll go ahead and tack it down. All right, so I'm gonna try and show you what I did here. You can see I just put in a bunch of staples, just randomly. And what I also did is where that bottom seam is and the top seam is, I went ahead and ran a straight line because that is where the center point is. So I am gonna put a bunch of staples right on each side of that line so that this board is, you can see I've got them out on the far outside edge here, but I want them right there on the inside of that line, about, oh, maybe a ½ inch or so, just to give this board a little bit more support. Okay, so make sure those are really attached to my backer here, so these don't all fall apart. I will, on this one too, come in with a couple of screws. I'll usually do that on each board, just one, even on the wide board, just an extra screw just to reinforce the glue, the staples. It'll all hold it together, but then the 1-inch screws will just give it a little bit more support. So I'm going to come in on either side of the line and add a bunch of staples on either side of the line to hold all these boards into place as well. So there you can see on either side of my line, I added a good, healthy number of staples all the way up, okay? So now I'm gonna go ahead and put in some screws. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my little piloter here and drill some pilot holes. So I'm gonna put one at the, so this board here, I'm gonna put one at the top and one just inside that line. And I'm gonna do that for all of my boards, going all the way up, and just have a few reinforcement screws in there, some 1-inch screws. These I get at Menards, placed by me. They have a T25 head on them, which is nice because I use T25 for everything. So it's nice that those little 1-inch ones have a T25 head too. So I will go ahead and just add some reinforcement screws on each board. So there you go. A nice little scattering of screws. That's definitely going to hold that together. So now all we have to do is go with our jigsaw and cut out this shape. Now we're just using that as a guide, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Just generally follow that shape and get it cut out. Okay, so now we have it pretty well cut out. Now you see there's a little bit of a gap here, but don't worry about that. We're going to cover that up with our next step anyhow. Really our next step is just going to take our orbital sander and just give it a little bit of a sand all the way around the edges, whatever we can, just to clean it up a little bit. And you see all these big knots? I really like that. The color variations, all that's going to make this look super cool when we finish this off. Okay, now one other thing I should have noted when we're doing the template, and I don't know why I did it on this one, but I did. I showed you putting the template down on the back. The template goes on the front. Okay, so we did put the template on there just so we could get our backer placement and get that cut the size we needed. But when we go to cut, flip it over, put your template on this side and cut from this side, because this side's relatively flat. Otherwise you kind of have to lift your jigsaw up to get around your backer piece. So it's just easier to cut your shape from the front versus the back. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. I got it done. So let's go ahead and get this sanded up a little bit and just kind of sand up the edges a little bit, and then we'll put our little finished piece of trim on. So there you go. You can see what we did there. We just went ahead and put that little piece of trim, just a piece of fence picket, you know, about 5/8 of an inch wide. Put that, and we just put a little bit of glue on there with some staples, and that was all there was to it. And we have a whole pile of sticks for our feather spines. but you can see how cool it looks. And you know, you could stain each board a different color. We could just give this good sand and a clear coat, and then all those color variations would stay there. Or just let it weather over time. It'll look really neat. And notice, so we started at the very tip for our spine, and then we just came. And the thing that I like about the backer board, you can really see it here too. The thing I like about the backer board is it kind of offsets this feather a little bit from the wall that you're going to hang it on. And I think that's a cool effect. And if you really wanted to go crazy, you could even put some neon lights behind it or something and light it up, and that would probably be really cool too. So this gal who bought this vendor stand, she sells little succulents that are actually candles, but they look like real succulents. It's a really neat product. But at any rate, I just thought the feather would kind of go with that and look kind of cool hanging on the front. So there you go. So that is today's project on that one. Thanks for watching.